What's shaking, everybody? John Ramdeen with you here in the FN studios, and this is Fight News Now Extra. In the news today, the UFC bantamweight champion could collide with his former teammate. A top prospect heads to Montreal, and a lightweight grappler calls him out. When he was on the MMA Hour, UFC 135-pound champion TJ Dillashaw, who recently left the Sacramento-based Team Alpha Male, said he would be open to an MMA bout with former mentor Urijah Faber. The California kid said that after Dillashaw made the decision to leave the gym and train in Denver, that he is no longer welcome at the famed academy. The 12-2 champion stated that if the two were to battle it out inside the cage, that he is confident that he would be able to get the job done and defeat the former WEC champion. Rising prospect Sage Northcutt is looking to improve his skill set, as the 19-year-old has decided to travel to Montreal, Canada to work with the team at the TriStar gym. The 6-0 Texan made his UFC debut a successful one when he dispatched Francisco Trevino before the first minute of the bout at UFC 192. Northcutt will test out the gym and decide if it is the right fit. If so, he would consider making a full-time move. 23-year-old Michigan native and UFC lightweight Kevin Lee said he would love to be the one to stop the hype train surrounding Sage Northcutt. Lee feels that he is better in every area than the hot prospect and stated that he will live the shortest career the UFC has ever known. The Stefan Patry-managed Lee is currently riding a 4-fight winning streak and is scheduled to meet Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu whiz Leo Santos at UFC 194 in Las Vegas on December 12th. And don't forget to tune in at 3 p.m. on October 24th, Saturday, as FN is pleased to present a 1-hour preview show as we get you set for UFC Fight Night in Dublin. Dustin Poirier taking on Irish Joe Duffy. Joined by Robin Black, TJ Dillashaw says he's down to fight Urijah Faber. Story's made. Now two teammates separated. Dillashaw goes his way. Faber says, "You're not welcome back in my gym." I think the story's there. I say go with it. They're running out of challengers at 135 pounds. I know Dominic Cruz is waiting in the wings, and we all want to see that fight with Dominic Cruz. But, I mean, you got a story. If Urijah Faber manages to defeat TJ Dillashaw, I would love to see Urijah Faber and Dominic Cruz do it again. So right now, I think it's an interesting element that you throw Urijah Faber back into the mix, the bad blood between the teammates.
Yeah, now fans love stories, and the UFC loves stories, because stories make cash, and cash is good. Everybody likes cash. What is of interest to me on this is how does it affect the way these guys would fight? And we've seen friends fight before. Sometimes they're not even great fights. The amount that you know about the other guy, the amount that you know about his tendencies, sometimes can create something you call option paralysis, where there's so many options, there's so much knowledge that guys start to hesitate. We've seen that in fights before. Also, TJ Dillashaw has a whole bunch of change in his life now. He's got a different home, he's got a different environment. All his friends are no longer his friends. Yeah, how does that affect TJ Dillashaw? And Urijah Faber in his head, how does that affect him for the big fight with Dominic Cruz? All of that is of real interest to me, man. Personally, I have this little feeling that Dominic Cruz is going to have a whole bunch of things that we don't expect and that Dwayne doesn't expect. And man, that fight to me is the interesting fight. Also, I can see how this affects people because it sort of affects us too. I think about it, Faber's my guy. Do I look at TJ Dillashaw differently? Try not to, but do I?
I look at Urijah Faber as a guy that, you know, he's made his way when he was in the WEC. And I know he was tired of telling people, you know, he was a mixed martial artist, and people say, "Oh, do you fight for the UFC?" It's like, no, I don't fight for the UFC. They don't have my division, or I would be there.
And people are like, what is a WEC?
Exactly. So Urijah Faber has been a guy that's always tried to get the biggest fights humanly possible, fought outside of the UFC for so long, and then when eventually he made his way into the UFC, fought for championships, fought Jose Aldo, fought Renan Barão, fought Frankie Edgar. So Urijah Faber isn't concerned who's standing across the cage from him. He's there to make the most money possible. We always know that Urijah Faber comes into his fights in tip-top shape. He's super creative, getting a little bit older now. And again, we've talked to Firas Zahabi, who says that those guys are the most interesting to watch because they get rid of the stuff that doesn't work and focus on the things that do work. And I think that to have a fight with TJ Dillashaw, the new lion of this 135-pound division, against the old guard, and I'm saying old guard in the nicest way because Urijah Faber is one of my favorites of all time, I think it definitely would give the fans something they were looking for.
You got me excited, man. There, honest to God, was a little tiny tear forming right here for that one, and I really am pumped about it. Urijah, as you're talking, what I'm thinking about with him is he's just so mentally strong. Yes, the dude studied human behavior before he started fighting. You talk to this guy for 5 minutes and you're like blown away by the level of intellect and where he is walking through the world. Is TJ TJ Dillashaw there. TJ Dillashaw, super athletic. He has a lot of drive, and anyone who works with him says he's super competitive. He brings a lot to this table. But Urijah's super smart. I'm also biased. I'm a huge Urijah Faber fan. He was one of the guys that made me want to fight, you know? And this one is interesting. Both guys are very interesting, but you do add this storyline, and as much as I hate to admit that storylines affect fights, this one is proving to me that they do.
The story right now, one of the stories anyways in mixed martial arts, is this hot prospect, Sage Northcutt, who looked very good in his UFC debut. A lot of people feel that he has a long way to go, but he's very different than a lot of fighters where he has that traditional background and you tend to see it in the way that he fights. However, you look at that UFC debut, I think he could have knocked Trevino outstanding, decided to go for that takedown, looked fantastic. Why make that move to TriStar now? Is it just, all right, we got to get see all the looks that are out there, get all the training partners we can, because right now hasn't tasted defeat, so what's working is working.
Yeah, it's a weird one. It's a weird position for this kid to be in, and to be kind of a superstar with only a few fights and only a couple years of fighting, and you got to learn fast. Conor McGregor was in this spot. He was ready, for sure, but he also went in and became ravenous with collecting information and learning everything there was to know. John Jones, kind of the same thing. As you put it, downloaded all the information about fighting. That's what this kid has to do, because he's in a spot to be super rich and famous and all those things that people grow up wanting to be. And the one thing he must control is his ability to fight and go up. Firas, man, we get to see it. People maybe underestimate the level of genius some of these elite martial art teachers are at. Firas is something very special.
How important is it that Sage Northcutt keeps some of those traditional tools? Because we've seen kind of mixed martial arts looks the same right now. Everybody, of course, everybody's different when it comes to their physical attributes, but for the most part, we're seeing the same techniques used day in and day out. Is it important that he keeps that traditional background and adds that element into the modern day MMA landscape?
You know, I was talking with a couple of my buddies on a podcast recently, and Greg Jackson, when he saw John Jones, was like, geez, I don't want to teach him too much of the up-to-the-minute stuff, because the stuff he does is so good. That takes genius in coaches to realize, I have all this information, and you'll do better if you use less of it in some ways. Firas is that kind of genius. He'll know that to make this guy different is important, and he's already different, so let's not undifferent him.
We will try to get some information about Sage Northcutt. We'll call our folks up at TriStar to check out his progress, and I have a feeling he will be a rising star and eventually get a title shot somewhere down the road. That is it for us. Don't go anywhere. More FNNE is still to come.